Have you ever noticed how a single emotion, one moment of anger, doubt, fear, or excitement, can completely redirect the course of your day, or even your life? Most people let their emotions steer the wheel, not realizing they're handing over their destiny to impulses that last seconds. But what if you learned to command your emotions instead of being controlled by them? Today, inspired by Jim Rohn's timeless wisdom, we're going to break down how to discipline your emotions so they serve you, not sabotage you. Stay with me until the end, because mastering this skill can change everything. 1. Emotional awareness. Emotional awareness is the foundation of emotional discipline because you cannot master what you cannot identify. Most people spend their entire lives being controlled by emotions they don't fully understand. Frustration that is actually fear, anger that is actually hurt, sadness that is actually exhaustion, anxiety that is actually uncertainty. Jim Rohn often said that emotions are signals, and those signals contain information if you slow down long enough to listen. The problem is that most people move too fast. They feel a rush of irritation and think it's about the traffic. They feel discouraged and think it's about the circumstance. They feel overwhelmed and think it's about the workload. But emotions are rarely about the surface situation. They usually come from something deeper, an expectation not met, a value being challenged, a need not being fulfilled, or a fear being activated. When you pause and name what you're feeling, something powerful happens. The emotion loosens its grip. Neuroscience shows that labeling emotion calms the brain because awareness shifts activity from the emotional centers to the reasoning centers. It gives you back the steering wheel. Instead of being dragged by the emotion, you observe it. Instead of being the emotion, you witness it. That is where real power begins. When you say, "I am feeling anxious," instead of "I am anxious," you create psychological distance. Jim Rohn taught that the greatest power a person can possess is the ability to pause and think. Awareness is that pause. It is the gap between stimulus and response, and that gap is where your freedom lives. Emotional awareness also allows you to see patterns. You start noticing that certain environments trigger you, certain conversations drain you, certain people elevate you, and certain habits sabotage you. Without awareness, you repeat patterns unconsciously. With awareness, you can interrupt and redesign them. Over time, emotional awareness gives you clarity about your internal world. You begin to understand why you feel what you feel. You learn the difference between reacting to the present and reacting to the past. You realize that emotions are not commands, they are invitations. They invite you to investigate, reflect, adjust, grow. And when you practice emotional awareness every day, pausing, naming, observing, you develop inner strength. You become more patient, more grounded, more self-controlled. You stop spiraling, you stop overreacting, you stop letting temporary emotions cause permanent damage. Instead, you hold your emotions with curiosity rather than judgment. You treat them as teachers rather than enemies. That is when emotional discipline starts becoming natural instead of forced. That is when you gain the ability to direct your emotional life instead of being a victim of it. Emotional awareness is not the final step, but it is the first and most essential one. Because the moment you can clearly see what you're feeling, you have already taken the first step toward mastery. 2. Responding instead of reacting. There is a profound difference between reacting and responding, and understanding this difference can change the entire direction of your life. A reaction is immediate, automatic, emotional. It is your survival brain taking the wheel. It is the quick comment you regret, the impulsive decision you wish you could undo, the emotional outburst that damages relationships and opportunities. A response, on the other hand, is deliberate, intentional, thoughtful. It is rooted in awareness rather than impulse. Jim Rohn emphasized that discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment, and nowhere is this more true than in your emotional life. When you discipline yourself to pause, even for just 3 seconds, You interrupt the emotional momentum long enough to choose your behavior instead of defaulting to it. Those 3 seconds may feel small, but they create enough space for logic, values, and long-term thinking to enter the moment. Reactions come from emotion. Responses come from clarity. Reactions are about protection. Responses are about direction. When you react, you're trying to defend yourself from discomfort. When you respond, you're trying to move yourself toward a better outcome. Emotional discipline is the practice of buying yourself time between the feeling and the action. It is learning to breathe instead of explode, to question instead of assume, to pause instead of attack. That pause is a superpower. It saves relationships, careers, opportunities, and self-respect. Think about how many regrets people carry that came from reacting too quickly. Angry texts, impulsive purchases, quitting out of frustration, lashing out at loved ones, saying things in the heat of the moment. The damage of a reaction can last far longer than the emotion that caused it. But when you respond, everything changes. You speak with intention. You act with maturity. You choose behaviors that align with your values, not your mood. Responding builds trust both internally and externally. Internally, you trust yourself more because you know you are not at the mercy of your emotions. Externally, people trust you because they know you are stable, consistent, and thoughtful. Responding also strengthens self-respect. You feel proud of yourself for maintaining your composure rather than losing control. Over time, responding becomes your default pattern. You begin to feel less reactive overall because the mind becomes trained to slow down. That slowdown creates emotional intelligence, psychological resilience, and mental strength. And as Jim Rohn often taught, the discipline to control your emotions is part of the discipline to control your life. Because the truth is, most failures are emotional, most mistakes are emotional, most conflicts are emotional. If you can manage the emotion that rises in the moment, you can manage the choices that shape your destiny. Responding instead of reacting is emotional maturity. It is leadership. It is wisdom in action. And it is one of the most powerful habits a person can ever develop. 3. Using emotion constructively. Using emotions constructively is the heart of emotional mastery, because the goal is not to suppress emotion, but to convert it into something useful. Every emotion contains energy. That energy can build or destroy depending on how you direct it. Most people try to control emotions by fighting them, ignoring them, or judging them, but suppression doesn't create strength. It creates pressure. The real goal is transformation. Jim Rohn taught that everything has a purpose, including emotions. Fear alerts you to risk, but it can also fuel preparation. Anger signals that something needs to change, and it can ignite powerful action when used wisely. Sadness slows you down long enough to reflect, process, and empathize. Excitement pushes you to move boldly, dream bigger, and create. When you learn the purpose behind an emotion, you stop resisting it and start cooperating with it. Emotional mastery means asking the right questions. What is this emotion trying to tell me? What needs to change? How can I use this feeling for growth instead of letting it become a trap? When fear shows up, don't shrink, prepare. When anger shows up, don't explode. Channel it into solving the problem. When sadness shows up, don't drown. Use it to understand yourself and others more deeply. When excitement shows up, don't rush blindly. Let it energize you while still applying wisdom. The key is direction, not denial. Emotions are like fire. Uncontrolled, they can burn your life down. Directed, they can power your dreams. Many people assume strong emotions are weaknesses, but in truth, they are strengths waiting to be mastered. Some of the greatest achievements in history were fueled by powerful emotions: frustration that sparked innovation, passion that created art, empathy that inspired humanitarian work, fear that encouraged preparation and strategy. When you take ownership of your emotional energy, you become unstoppable. You no longer waste energy on emotional spirals, overthinking, or self-sabotage. Instead, every emotion becomes fuel. Even negative emotions can be turned into motivation. Disappointment can push you to try again. Frustration can force you to find a smarter way. Jealousy can reveal what you truly desire. Embarrassment can motivate growth. The moment you learn to redirect emotional energy, your life accelerates. You become more productive because emotions no longer derail you. You become more resilient because challenges no longer break you. You become more confident because you know you can handle whatever you feel. Emotional mastery is not about feeling less. It is about feeling with purpose. It is about aiming your emotions like an arrow instead of firing them in all directions. That is how you turn emotional chaos into emotional intelligence. That is how you transform emotional reactions into emotional power. And that is how you use every feeling, pleasant or difficult, as a tool for personal evolution. With this mindset, emotions stop being obstacles and start becoming advantages. You grow, you create, you rise, and you become the kind of person who is not controlled by emotion, but strengthened by it. 4. Staying steady under pressure. Pressure doesn't create character, it reveals it. When life presses hard on you, what comes out is not what you wish you were, but who you truly are in that moment. This is why staying steady under pressure is one of the most valuable skills you can ever develop. Most people crumble not because the situation is impossible, but because they never trained themselves to remain calm on the inside. They allow their emotions to spike and take control of their judgment. Panic rises, clarity drops. Small problems start looking like disasters. But the disciplined person practices steadiness long before pressure arrives. They understand that calm is not a magical personality trait. It is a deliberate practice, refined daily through awareness, patience, and intentional self-regulation. To become steady, you must pay attention to the immediate signs of internal turbulence. Faster breathing, tightened shoulders, racing thoughts, or sudden irritability. Instead of reacting blindly, you pause. You breathe slowly. You ground yourself in the present moment. You ask questions instead of jumping to conclusions. You direct your mind instead of allowing it to run uncontrolled. This small gap between stimulus and response becomes your greatest source of power. Staying steady does not mean you feel nothing. It means you choose not to drown in what you feel. It means you acknowledge fear, but don't surrender to it. You experience pressure, but don't let it dominate your decisions. You observe negative thoughts without letting them pull you into anxiety. You remain the driver of your own inner state. True steadiness is also built through preparation. You rehearse emotional discipline in small daily challenges, in traffic, during disagreements, while under time pressure, or when things don't go your way. Every moment of discomfort becomes training. Over time, you start noticing that situations that once shook you now barely move you. You begin to trust yourself, not because life became easier, but because you became stronger. Under pressure, untrained people become chaotic. They react impulsively, speak without thinking, make decisions based on fear, and lose control of their emotions. But the steady person becomes sharp. They slow down mentally. They analyze situations with clarity. They respond with intention rather than instinct. They communicate more effectively, think more rationally, and make better choices. This is why your internal state is the most important asset you will ever protect. When you regulate your internal world, the external world loses its power over you. Suddenly, problems become manageable, challenges become opportunities, and pressure becomes a signal for you to rise, not break. Great leaders, great athletes, great thinkers, they all share one skill: the ability to remain composed when everything around them feels unstable. People follow those who stay calm. People trust those who stay steady. Because steadiness creates confidence, not just in yourself, but in everyone who interacts with you. Remember this: Calm is not a gift, it is a practice. And like any practice, it grows stronger with repetition. The more you choose steadiness, the more your mind becomes conditioned to return to it automatically. Eventually, steadiness becomes your default state, even in storms. When life gets intense, don't rise to the pressure. Sink deeper into your calm. That is where your real strength lives. 5. Emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is understanding that feelings are temporary, but the consequences of your reactions can last a lifetime. It is the ability to experience emotions without letting them hijack your behavior or control your decisions. Many people believe maturity arrives with age, but true emotional maturity arrives only with self-awareness, responsibility, and the willingness to grow. It's recognizing that while you may not control everything that happens to you, you always control how you interpret it, how you react to it, and what you choose to do next. Emotional maturity begins with responsibility, taking ownership of your reactions instead of blaming others for them. Immature people avoid accountability. They blame circumstances, they blame other people, they blame their mood. Mature individuals understand that their emotional responses are their own and therefore must be managed, not justified. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It means understanding them, naming them, and deciding what they mean before acting on them. You learn to ask, is what I'm feeling real, or is it a story my mind is creating? Is this reaction helping me or hurting me? Is this feeling temporary? And if so, am I about to make a permanent decision based on it? Emotional maturity is also learning to separate what you want to feel from what you need to do. You may want to explode in anger, but you choose patience. You may want to withdraw into sadness, but you choose communication. You may want to react impulsively, but you choose strategy. In every moment, you choose growth over ego. Maturity is also the ability to handle disappointment without resentment, success without arrogance, and criticism without defensiveness. Instead of being threatened by feedback, a mature person uses it as fuel for improvement. Instead of taking everything personally, they learn to interpret situations objectively. Instead of reacting to every emotional trigger, they prioritize peace over drama and purpose over impulse. Emotional maturity also comes from understanding impermanence. Feelings shift, seasons change. What overwhelms you today may be irrelevant tomorrow. When you understand this, you stop treating temporary emotions like permanent truths. You stop saying things you will regret. You stop making decisions driven by fear, anger, jealousy, or insecurity. You begin to respond with wisdom rather than instinct. Another sign of emotional maturity is the ability to regulate your emotional environment, not by controlling others, but by controlling what you allow into your life. You set boundaries. You choose who has access to your energy. You protect your mental space. You stop seeking validation from people who offer none. Instead, you build emotional stability from within. Mature individuals know how to express themselves clearly, listen without defensiveness, and apologize without ego. They don't run from conflict. They handle it with respect and clarity. They don't pretend to be perfect. They embrace growth. Maturity is not about feeling less. It's about managing more. It's the understanding that emotions are tools, not rulers. They inform you, but they should never dominate you. They reveal your inner truth, but they should never drag you away from your values. Emotional maturity gives you control over your life, your relationships, and your future. When you take charge of your inner world, life stops feeling chaotic. You stop fighting everything. You stop breaking under stress. You stop giving away your power. Instead, you rise above what once consumed you. You navigate life with clarity, patience, self-respect, and inner strength. Emotional maturity is not the absence of emotion, it is the mastery of it. Learn to command yourself and you command life.